This is why this is the greatest miracle in the Old Testament. On several occasions, the Israelites found themselves boxed into a corner without apparent means of escape. As they rejoiced because of their newly given and started heading towards the Promised Land, they realized they were in trouble again. This is because the taskmaster that had just set them free was bent on taking them back into captivity. Unfortunately, there was no way of escape either ahead or behind for any one of them, and pull out the wisdom from it. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his servants had a change of heart towards the people, and they said, "What is this that we have done? We have let Israel go from serving us." So Pharaoh harnessed horses to his war chariots for battle and took his army with him. And he took 600 chosen war chariots, and all the other war chariots of Egypt with fighting charioteers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the Israelites as they were leaving confidently and defiantly. The Egyptians chased them with all the horses and war chariots of Pharaoh, his horsemen, and his army, and they overtook them as they camped by the sea, besides Pi-hahiroth, in front of Baal-zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up and saw the Egyptians marching after them, and they were very frightened. So the Israelites cried out to the Lord. Then they said to Moses, "Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What is it you have done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Did we not say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians as slaves than to die in the wilderness." Then Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. Take your stand, be firm and confident and undismayed, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For those Egyptians whom you have seen today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, while you only need to keep silent and remain calm." "The Lord," said Moses, "why do you cry to me? Tell your sons of Israel to move forward toward the sea. As for you, lift up your staff and stretch out your hands over the sea and divide it, so that the sons of Israel may go through the middle of the sea on dry land. As for me, hear this. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they will go in the sea after them. And I will be glorified and honored through Pharaoh and all his army and his war chariots and his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know without any doubt and acknowledge that I am the Lord, when I am glorified and honored through Pharaoh, through his war chariots and his charioteers." The angel of God, who had been going in front of the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them. The pillar of the cloud moved from in front and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. It was a cloud along with darkness, even by day to the Egyptians, but it gave light by night to the Israelites. So one army did not come near the other all night. Then Moses stretched out his hands over the sea, and the Lord swept the sea back by a strong east wind all that night, and turned the seabed into dry land, and the waters were divided. The Israelites went into the middle of the sea on dry land, and the waters formed a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. Then the Egyptians pursued them into the middle of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses, his war chariots, and his charioteers. So it happened at the early morning watch before dawn, that the Lord looked down on the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and cloud and put them in a state of confusion. He made their chariot wheels hard to turn, and the chariots difficult to drive. So the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from Israel, for the Lord is fighting for them against the Egyptians." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may come back over the Egyptians, on their war chariots, and on their charioteers." So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal flow at sunrise, and the Egyptians retreated right into it, being met by the returning water. So the Lord overthrew the Egyptians and tossed them into the mists of the sea. the waters returned and covered the chariots and charioteers, and all the army of Pharaoh that had gone into the sea after them. Not even one of them survived. But the Israelites walked on dry land in the middle of the sea, and the waters formed a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. The Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the seashore. Exodus 14:5-30 amp. The first reaction for most of them was fear, but since there was no solution in fear, Moses, who was the calm one, ended up receiving God's wisdom on how to come out of that fix. The truth is, God expects us to be calm in the face of challenges, especially when things look terrible, because that is the only way He can communicate with us and the way we can also hear Him talk to us. Secondly, God wants us to approach Him boldly, especially when we have any bugging questions. Hebrews 4:16 amp says, "Therefore let us, with privilege, approach the throne of grace." That is the throne of God's gracious favor, with confidence and without fear, so that we may receive mercy for our failures and find His amazing grace to help in time of need, an appropriate blessing coming just at the right moment. It is necessary to keep the spirit of fear from taking over our hearts, because it only brings confusion which will in turn destabilize or disrupt the thinking process of anyone. With calmness and boldness, we can turn to God for inquiries on what to do, just like Moses. He spoke to God, and sure enough, he received instructions on what to do next. We speak to God in times of trouble, yet don't receive any assurance or instruction because we have pushed faith aside and surrendered to the control of fear. Life's journey comes with so many surprises that often take us unaware. But the good news is that we serve a God that knows the end from the beginning. Yes, unexpected events could creep in and leave us wondering what to do and how to respond. But we must never forget that God has ways that are freely available to us at all times, and these ways will always provide a way of escape for us. So how do we avoid being boxed in a corner and feeling helpless when unplanned situations come up? The answer is to live with a constant hunger for God's wisdom. God always knows the way out of every trap on our path, even at any crossroads in life. It is so reassuring to know that God knows the way, knows what we need to do, and knows what will happen when we do what He says. We must expect to receive wise leading or direction from God when we call upon Him. Here is what God says in Jeremiah 33:3 amp. "Call to me, and I will answer you, and tell you, and even show you great and mighty things, things which have been confined and hidden, which you do not know and understand and cannot distinguish.